Hey everybody, this is Cody Bateman. Welcome to another episode of our Relationship Marketing Podcast. Very, very excited for our guest today. I just want to do a quick shout out to all of our listeners. The viewership keeps growing every single week, and we appreciate all those that are making a commitment to their sales and marketing careers, to their business building careers, learning this concept called relationship marketing. And boy, I'll tell you, we have some guests on here every single week that really share impactful things about relationship marketing and how that fits in today's sales channel and today's sales process. We have a guest on today that, my goodness, this guy, yeah, he's got some good stuff. Jeff Bajorek. Jeff, where are you at? Are you here? Come on, Jeff, come on with it.
I'm right here.
Hey,
Jeff,
how you doing?
Good. How are you, Cody?
Well,
Thanks for having me
on. You on. We were joking around a little bit before the show started. You know, Jeff's this super young guy, so I asked him how old he was, and he answered by basically telling me he's a lot younger than I am. And so we were joking that, you know, God, when I was growing up, it was the old guys that had all the authority and stuff. And now that I'm old, it's all the young guys like you, Jeff, have all the authority and the attention of people. So I kind of missed the mark all the way through. I know old guys probably know what I'm talking about. You might not, but.
I don't know, Cody. I don't know if this will help things or hurt things, but I'm going to say it anyways. I had a prospect actually approached me, and they said, we're having some problems getting some meetings because we're so young. We're actually trying to increase our gray hair factor a little bit. We're hoping you'd be able to help us. I'm like, all right, wait a second. I'm used to being the young guy on the team. And then, what happens? You add enough time, and you're not the young guy anymore. So I think there's a sweet spot for everybody, and there's
a sweet spot for sure.
Yeah.
Well, listen, you've got some great stuff going on, my friend. I mean, it's kind of fun to watch. You got this podcast, the Why and the Buy podcast.
Yes, sir.
Very energetic. Lots of really cool stuff on there. And then this book of yours, The 5 Forgotten Fundamentals of Prospecting. We're going to jump into that. We're going to talk about that. Let me just tell our listeners a little bit about you real quick. From Detroit, Michigan, Jeff is an authentic sales strategies and methods. Helps customers drive massive results. Spent more than a decade in the field as a top performer. I always think that's really important. It's important to me that when we have guests on that you've been in trenches, you've been there, you've done that. You haven't just written about it. You've actually done it. Jeff's certainly one of those guys. Has an incredible book, The 5 Forgotten Fundamentals of Prospecting, and the Why and the Buy podcast. You've also been on a lot of sales podcasts. That Jeffrey Gitomer guy, I mean, a lot of people know Jeffrey Gitomer. He's actually going to be a guest on here soon. I've been a fan of Jeff's for years. He's one of the old guys. Jeffrey's one of the old guys. But boy, you've provided great content on his show before, so it's been fun to kind of watch you guys work together. But so there you have it, and I want to jump right in, Jeff. So we're gonna have a little fun with this. Whenever I see a book that says 3 steps or 4 things or 5 fundamentals, I immediately, and a lot of people are like this. I think part of the reason why those headlines sell well is because our mind is kind of trained to look at a list of things. So like, if you say 5 steps, your mind immediately thinks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What are those steps? So I'm going to jump right in. 5 forgotten fundamentals of prospecting. Right out of the gate, myself and most of our listeners would pretty say, okay, well, just jump to the chase, brother. What is it? What are the 5 forgotten fundamentals? Real fast, just really fast. What are the 5?
Know what you bring to the table. Know who you should be talking to. Create tension. Be the expert. And keep your swagger. Those are my 5. That's the way I explain them.
Okay, so I encourage all of our listeners to a lot of times people are listening while they're driving. Mm-hmm. So if you are driving, don't do this. But if you happen to be listening to this from your office or at your breakfast table or something, always have a notepad and paper and write some of these things down. Hit me on the 5 one more time. Just sure. What are the 5?
Know what you bring to the table. know who you should be talking to. You have to create tension. You also have to be the expert, and you have to keep your swagger because
Okay.
selling's hard.
Okay. Now these are fundamentals of prospecting.
Yes.
Um, the one that really pops out, which one do you think pops out to me?
Tension.
Tension. Absolutely. And I guarantee you, most people listening, that was the one that popped out.
Yep.
How did you say how to create tension?
Yeah, I say create tension. You have to create tension as part of the process because it is a stimulus to act. And for a long time, classically trained salespeople will talk about finding pain, seeking pleasure, whatever it is. The way that I encompass those concepts is tension is a stimulus to act. There is a difference. There's a chasm. There's a gap between where people are, where your prospects are right now, and where you can get. And you need to create an idea of feeling in their mind that there is a better state than where they are right now. And then creating that, intention is often misunderstood as discomfort. It's not discomfort. Listen, sometimes there's a really nice sports car on the other end of that showroom window, or on the other end of the showroom, wherever you stand in the car dealership, and you really want it. That is tension. Okay. Sometimes it's, man, I am not making enough money to pay my bills right now. That's a completely different kind of tension, but either one is a stimulus. Okay. And you mentioned the Why on the Buy podcast earlier. My partner, Christy Walters, and I mentioned her in the book because this is a brilliant statement that she made. She said, you can't create any tension without first having a connection. So if you imagine two ends of a string, a rubber band even, okay? If you pull on that rubber band, you increase the tension that's on the fibers in that rubber band. Cut that rubber band, remove the connection. There's no more tension. So we get into the actual blocking and tackling of prospecting, and creating that connection, building the rapport, creating a relationship, having some known. Being a known entity even is where it needs to start. You can't create any tension unless you first have a connection with that other person. And I think that, really touches on the relationship marketing angle that you speak so well to, of, having an awareness of who you are and how you can help people.
Right.
That's where it all has to start.
I want to come back to that.
Sure.
But before I do, before I lose this thought, I want to get this out. But I do want to come back to what you just said about having a connection or a relationship prior to creating the tension, because I think we need to explore that a little bit more. But before we do that, Tony Robbins has always said the fear of loss is a bigger motivator than the desire for gain.
Mm-hmm.
Does that relate to what you're saying about tension? Is fear of loss, like in the sales process, like you said, that you always train that there's got to be some element of, a fear of loss, or, what's in it for me, or what am I going to miss out on kind of thing. That's why people do sales that are only good till a certain date, and
Sure.
don't miss out now, and only so many will get, which is constant. It's funny. I'm in the variable print on demand business with my company, Send Out Cards, and we use large Xerox technology. So we use the Rolls Royces of Xerox digital printers. And it's the funniest thing because the Xerox reps, sales people, the Xerox rep come in literally almost on an annual basis. They'll come in and they got the latest, greatest thing. And it's always, 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 hey, we can roll you out of the one you got, and we can roll this one new in, but you got to do it by the end of this month. And if you do, we're going to do always, like it's always. And I always joke with them saying, yeah, whatever.
Right.
Say what, I'm going to take that deal, but I'm going to take it in the middle of the next month. Oh, no, that'll be no. I'm going to call you the middle of next month, but I want the deal you're offering that's only good till the end of this month. So I like to give them some hassle about that, but it's, how do you balance that? Really, I joke about it, but how do you balance that? Because sales strategy, marketing and sales strategy does have an element of fear of loss in it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that's what you mean by the tension thing, or at least it's at least one indicator.
Yes.
Like you said, there are many. like, how do you get around that? Because as a consumer, as a buyer, it kind of drives me nuts. As a buyer,
Yeah.
it's like, listen, if your offer on this car on this lot is only good till the end of the month, I'm and maybe I'm an old guy that, you know, I just like to give people a hard time. I'm going to wait till next month to get that same deal.
The thing about the time oriented deals, the end of the quarter sales, you know, I mean, we're recording this now. It's just after the 4th of July. So all the car companies are putting their model year end stuff out. Their, you know, 4th of July deals. I don't know what it is about President's Day, but all the furniture companies put everything on sale. So there's something about timing there. But when it's timing dependent like that, it's almost always because it's in the best interest of the seller, not the buyer.
That's right.
And so they're trying to come up with incentives. They're trying to throw stuff at you because they don't actually know why you would buy in the first place, or they can't sell well enough to, you know, to create that picture right for you. They can't paint that picture for you on their own. So they just throw money at it.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, I don't need it right now. And they say, well, this is a time-dependent deal. You have got until the end of the week to purchase this. And, you know, you've been doing this long enough to say, well, no, if you're telling me it costs this much now, I'm pretty sure if I brought just exactly that much money to you next month, you'd probably sell it to me then, wouldn't you? And you would be right 95% of the time, regardless of what they tell you in the moment. And those kind of tactics are what always drove me nuts about salespeople. And when you make it about money, it's funny. We train our customers. If you make it about money, it's always going to be about money.
Yeah.
If you make it about the better state, if you make it about the outcome, if you make it about, you know, those things that only you provide. And I talk about that. Know what you bring to the table. What is it that you do that nobody else can? Maybe there's one other person in the world who can do something else. But I mean, in the world that you're exposed to, what is it that you do that your competitors don't? And what can you provide that will get them someplace that they are better off to, you know, at that point than they are right now? Make the conversation about that. And then all of a sudden, price becomes an afterthought. Listen, if you're going to buy something that you don't feel you need, you don't want to pay a penny more than you absolutely have to for it. But if you need that thing and you know that this is going to help you accomplish whatever it is that you want to accomplish, then
So
price is the last thing.
yeah. So are the time sensitive incentives, are they less and less effective in today's marketplace, you think? Or, I mean, I, as a consumer, think they are, but I'm interested in what the sales stats would share about that.
It depends on the sale. I mean, sometimes on still work, and there's a reason for it. And particularly in a B2C oriented sales process where there's really less of a process, it's just like, well, I'm gonna buy this because I need it. It's laundry detergent. It's, you know, they're groceries. It's, you know, my wife and I will, you know, we'll go to the grocery store and what's on sale. And you know what the kids get in their lunches for school that week, a lot of times depends on what the grocery store wanted to get rid of that week, because they get bored anyway. So we're constantly moving stuff around. But I think in more of a B2B aspect, which is the world I've always lived in, listen, when you give a price, you are talking about, or you're essentially stating the value to you. You're creating that value in the mind of your prospect, in the mind of your customer, and it's really hard to bring it up after you've reduced it. And you know, I'm sure you've done this. I certainly do it from time to time. I know seasonally that some of the department stores and the clothing retailers will have sales, right? Like Nordstrom's got 2 sales for men a year, one in the summer, one in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not buying anything the month before I know that sale is going to happen,
Right.
because I know that same thing's going to be 30% off.
Right.
Now, when I need it, hey, I go and I'll pay full price or whatever, but I've got a pretty good idea that this shirt's going to be 30% less than what it is right now. And I'm good on shirts until next month. I might as well wait. In some ways, that retailer is losing revenue because they're willing to devalue the product.
Yeah.
So these time sensitive, it's an urgency on the seller's part that is not in line with an urgency on the buyer's part. And that tension creates urgency.
Which is not conducive to building a relationship, which is what it was about, you know, how to build relationship with people, genuine connection with other human beings. these kind of tactics are certainly not conducive to that. So let's go back to this B2B. You say B2B. Okay, you're a consultant, so I'm going to have you consult for a second. So let's go back to the Xerox example. So Xerox, they're notorious. Like, it's unbelievable. In fact, it drives me crazy. And I joke with them about it. My team jokes with them about it. I've got to believe that they're starting to sense in the B2B world that they live in that these kind of tactics just don't really resonate, but they keep hitting us with them. How would you consult Xerox to create the tension and get the results that they're looking for? Because their whole strategy is, see, we actually put a payment on the deal, and we always lease the equipment, and then they charge us per click. So their whole idea always is to put new equipment in every year. For some reason, they always got to get the latest equipment to their users. So it's more of a residual purchase or a residual sell for them. I'm a residual sell for them. Like, they're selling me new equipment every single year. It's a new pay-per-click. It's a new this or that. And so what would your advice be to them on getting out of that non-effective incentive world and more into the relationship world with me? What would you tell the Xerox folks?
So what happens with a lot of copier reps, office solutions providers, is they get so caught up in the transactional nature of what they do that they make it more and more about the transactions. And of the copier reps or former copier reps that I've talked to, Larry Levine's a good friend of mine. I know he's a friend of the show. What he does, and has always been so effective with, and I think, and I believe works, is really grabbing your customer and hugging them and really digging into the needs. Look, as a copier rep, I know that I need so much residual payments or residual revenue coming in. And I know that if I can do what I need to do and get a new lease in every year or every 2 years with the latest technology, that latest technology and kind of positioning that technology is what is going to help people want to stay involved with me. But you know what really helps people stay involved with you outside of the technology is you knowing what the goals of that business are. You knowing how your copier, how your prints, your pay-per-click, whatever it is, how that's going to help your customer reach their customers. And then if we talk about fear of loss, it's, okay, what if it's not about the best technology of the new printers or the new copiers so much as a newer copier may be more reliable. Yeah. I know that you need a machine that is going to deliver the results for your print capabilities that you need in order to continue to function to serve your customers. So make it about your customers and helping you, being able to help your customers serve their customers. And when you focus on that, your customers will work on helping you. I've had customers pad their orders at the end of quarters for me without asking them. It blew my own mind, and it happened more than once. So I know it wasn't a fluke, but I sold to hospitals. And so I'd deliver products and I'd have products drop shipped to cover certain case needs and surgical needs in the hospital. And, around end of July, sometimes around the end of the year, it was, hey, Jeff, why don't you send us some more of these? And I'd look at my customer and I'd look at the surgical schedule and say, well, you don't need these. And this particular customer would say, we'll find a way to use them. And I'd get a little wink. It's like, well, where does that come from? Right? Because I was never, but here's the thing. I was never the person that asked for an extra order at the end of the quarter. I was never trying to pull ahead. And your best customers, the ones that know that you're invested in them, they look for ways to take care of you when they can, because they know you are always looking to take care of them.
It's about relationship.
It is.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so I think a lot of people don't see the forest for the trees. They see renewable revenue. They see monthly income numbers or monthly revenue numbers that leads to their income. You see all that stuff that they're responsible for, and they can't seem to get out of their own way. But if you can stop and take just a little bit of an extra wide view on things, and you can look and see, well, how are the people that I'm supposed to be helping? How can I help them help their customers? Right. If you do that, and I mean, Jeffrey Gittimer taught me taught me that. Red Book of Selling and the Sales Bible, those two of the most formative, two of the most important books that were formative to my sales career way back when. It freed me up because I've always believed in helping people. And I couldn't quite reconcile helping people with selling things to people early in my career. And once I got that, it clicked. And my career it was on a completely different trajectory after that.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so let's go back. I want to go back to
Sure.
the whole creating relationship prior to the tension.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit more about that, and because again, that applies more to the messaging that we have on this show is the power of relationship in today's sales process. You're saying you need relationship prior to creating the tension. So talk to us about that.
Well, you need a connection prior to creating any tension, and that's the physics part of it. But in reality, and in the world that we live in sales, that connection often turns into a relationship. And I think when the reason the 5 are ordered in that particular way, you have to know what you bring to the table. You have to know who you should be talking to. So know how you can help people and know who you can best help. When you know people, when you know the companies or the people, the entities that you can best serve and best help, it's really easy to create that connection because you have something worth talking about.
Right.
I think so many people get it backwards. And I think relationships are one of the most misunderstood terms or concepts in sales because people think, ask anybody who's been in sales for a long time, what does it take to be successful in this business? And they will tell you it's all about relationships.
Right.
Okay. Well, what happens when some 22-year-old kid gets hired as a new insurance agent, licensed and an independent insurance agent, or it gets hired on in any company where it takes relationships in order to sell? How do they get them? They don't just land in you. No one's giving them to you. So you've got to go out there. You've got to meet people. You've got to have a reason for someone to talk to you. And what happens more often than not, and this drives me crazy, if I never hear the term wine and dine again, it'll be good. Because no one is buying. Listen, if they're buying from you simply because you took them to a nice dinner, then the moment your competitor takes them to a nicer dinner, they're going to buy from them instead. So listen, dinner is valuable, right? Rounds of golf are valuable, but they're valuable for the couple of hours you get to spend with that person. And they're valuable for the messaging and the value you bring to that connection. Most often, when you're trying to gain new business, that relationship comes from the business value you bring to that relationship. You may turn into friends later, but if you go looking for new friends and then hopefully trying to do business with them, one, it gets awkward because it's awkward to do business with friends a lot of times. And secondly, how many people who don't know you are looking for new friends? Especially if there's an age gap, right? That 22-year-old new sales rep has to call on someone in their 50s with older kids and things. There's not a whole lot to relate to there, and they're supposed to be buddies so they can eventually do business. No, play it out. It doesn't make any sense. But if you've got a reason to be listened to, if you've got something valuable to contribute, hey, look, this is how I can help your business. And this is a unique perspective I have. Maybe you have additional leverage because you're 20 years someone's junior and you see things from a different point of view. And maybe that person is trying to connect with a different generation and you provide that insight. Well, great. That person will now take your call, but not because they want someone to go to the ball game with on a Friday night, but because they know you can help them. And then through that relationship, you can do more things. Maybe you'll be buddies later, but I think it's important to know that you need to have something valuable first. You need to have some reason for them to pay attention to you. Then you need to prove that you're trustworthy, and then you need to earn that trust.
Well, let's talk about the 22-year-old sales kid for a second.
Sure.
So, a lot of what you're saying is real important. They need the first 2. Now, give me the first 2 again. I got to write these down. Give me. They need to. First 2 of the 5 fundamentals.
Know what you bring to the table.
Know what you bring to the table. So this 22-year-old kid, he's going to learn what he brings to the table, and chances are, he's a young upcoming sales stud, and he's going to know what he brings to the table. He might be a little cocky about what he brings to the table. You know what I mean? That comes with youth and whatever. I'm going to write this down. Know what he brings to the table. What's the second one?
Know who you should be talking to.
Know who to talk to, and then then we go into
Tension.
the tension.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So let's go back real quick to the 22-year-old kid. Now you're in the training mode. You're training your salesperson. Know what you bring to the table. Have confidence in your product or service. You're going to teach them how to apply that to the prospect's needs and use that as a means to creating a relationship, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, and I know you know this because I've heard you, and I know this is part of what you teach. It's part of what most people teach today. It's great, especially one of the hardest things to teach the 22-year-old up-and-coming sales star who knows what he brings to the table. He's cocky about it. He's got a great product or service. He's going to prove to the world that he's going to be a super big success. But the biggest mistake young salespeople make is they go out there with that confidence and I mean, they light it up, and they forget the importance of listening and
Yes.
of assessing people's needs. So how do you train that 22-year-old to channel that confidence, but make it about the consumer, not about their own self?
Well, I came out of medical device sales. So a lot of my customers were physicians. Most of them were physicians. And prescription without diagnosis is malpractice.
Right.
I think we've heard Mark Hunter talk about that before too, at Outbound. And, he's been on our show a couple of times. But I think, you can't, and we can go back to Stephen Covey, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Right.
You can't, and I put this out on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, and I actually it got a lot more response than I thought. I said, but the only way you can get engagement out of a statement is by either using blatant hyperbole, which is probably the wrong kind of engagement, or you just get dumb lucky and someone happens to be looking for exactly what you have at the time you're saying it. The way you engage people in conversations is by asking questions. And the time for you to talk about or present what it is that you do will make itself apparent when you ask the right questions and when you engage in dialogue. And I talk a lot about that in chapter 3 about creating tension. You create tension with questions and not about making people squirm. There's a time and a place for that, but let's not run to that. Salespeople have been trained to do that, and then they get known and they have a reputation for making people squirm, which is not what you want when you're trying to build trust. But when you can really engage the other person, when you can demonstrate your interest, when you can validate them and what they're doing, what they're trying to do, and then offer them some of your expertise, now all of a sudden you become a resource. Now all of a sudden there's a connection there. Now all of a sudden, once you have demonstrated that you can help them, if the time is right, if the situation it presents itself, you can ask a question that's a little more pointed. But what I find is more often than not, those people are looking to you for their expertise. They won't let you get that far. They will say, hey, there's something here. What does it look like to do this? I've had this happen probably 3 or 4 times in the last week. People will call me and say, so what would it look like? Please illustrate for me what it would look like for you to come and do a day-long engagement for us or whatever it is. And that's solely because you take an interest in that other person, you take an interest in what they're trying to do. Maybe you offer a little bit of advice or some expertise. I'm just over here. Do you do this? Because this sounds like it would be really cool. And then you become this person who's known as a resource. And that's all you ever need to be.
Right. Be a resource. That's really good. So let me ask you, what's more important, creating the relationship or making the sale?
Oh, creating the relationship.
Okay. Now, how do you teach that to that young kid? Now you're a trainer again. You got the young buck coming up. How do you teach that young kid? Because they're anxious to break the records, man. They got to prove themselves. They're going to go, take over the world kind of stuff. It's a hard lesson. This is what I'm in this business. I'm in the relationship marketing business. So I'm trying to teach people every day what you just said. Relationships are so much more important than the sell. It's just vital. In fact, relationships really the only thing. So part of the sales process is in my opinion, the entire part of the sales process is creating relationship. Now there's sales gurus that might differ because, there's gurus. In fact, I'm going to talk about this in a minute. I get into debate sometimes with the closers. Sales got closers, and they want to debate this with me. It's like, yeah, Cody, that relationship stuff, that's great. But man, you got to teach people how to close, going for the kill, make it happen, and I've got stats to prove it. And if it's all about relationship, half the time you never get to the sell, which does kind of tie in. You got a new project right now. You don't have a closing problem.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't seen this. I haven't read it. But I'm assuming this might cover a little bit about what I'm talking about.
It does. And thank you for mentioning that. I'm really proud of this piece. I tell people, and I put this in the book, I'd rather see you create a relationship at the expense of a sale than create a sale at the expense of a relationship.
Wow, it's really good. That's good.
And now, with an asterisk there, if you sell something purely transactional that you never intend to sell again to that person, then you're playing by a different set of rules. Okay. But it's funny. You got to go out there. You got to close. You got to kill. You got to eat what you kill. Listen, how many reorders can a dead customer place? Right? Before we start using the K word, right? Let's think about what we're actually saying here.
Right.
But what is it that you're trying to do? Because a customer who trusts you and trusts that you have their best interest in mind, they're going to come back to you. They're going to come back to you first. They're going to ask you how much it costs, not if you can get to this price, we can think about doing business with you, before we take your price and shake you down in front of somebody else to see if they can go lower. Right.
Right.
What is it? Listen, there's a reason that the salty, the salty grizzled veteran will say, yeah, you know what, kid, it's about relationships. And that's how you make your number for 30 years instead of 30 days, and I think that there's a real perspective shift there. And you got to ask that 22-year-old kid, look, you want to make your number today, or you want to make your number next year and next decade? And listen, I can advise you in a couple of different ways. I'm better at one way than another, but I can advise you in a couple of different ways. If you want to kill your numbers right now, you want to make a name for yourself immediately, you're going to have to do a whole lot more work. It can be done, but you're also going to be costing yourself a lot of effort on the other end here, because when you're just leaving ruins behind you, it's tough to pick up the pieces. And unless you want to be jumping from job to job and industry to industry and starting over all the time, you're going to need to be known as someone who's dependable, someone who can be counted on. Because this is a people business. Every business is a people business. And if you try to make a name for yourself at the expense of the others in your space, you're going to have a hard time doing it more than once.
Yeah.
And so it's look, you mentioned I got more gray hairs on my head than I did, certainly than I do the 22-year-old, right? And you've already mentioned, I'm not going to call you old, Cody, but you already said that you have the perspective. And I think, if someone was to join my organization and I was working and they were assigned to shadow me for a couple of days, I think I'd find a couple of instances where that long term came and made things easier in the short term.
Yeah.
But the long term can't make things easier in the short term unless you put the long term effort in first.
Yeah, for sure.
It comes back around.
Well, relationships take time.
They do.
It takes time to develop with people, and I think patience is a big factor that needs to be discussed, especially with that young startup person in the sales career. You have been known to say, I hope I say this right. Process and ditch the so-called sales hacks. That really caught my attention when I got the notes on the show. I was like, well, that's interesting. Trust the process. So first part of the question, what is the process?
Yep.
Ditch the so-called sales hacks. What the heck is a sales hack? Go ahead.
Well, there are certain fundamentals that you can't ignore. Wrote a book about that. The next book that I'm working on piecing together right now is called Trust the Process. And there is a process to everything. I believe there are 4 steps to the sales process. 1 is identify who you can help. Right? 2 is get their attention. 3, communicate your value, and 4, ask for the next step. Sometimes the next step means another meeting so you can communicate your value. Okay, so that end part of that cycle may have to happen a couple, 3, 4, 20 times if you sell something really complex. But that is the process. And where people miss, where people fail to make sales, it almost always is tied back to a step that they either skipped, inadvertently forgot about, or blatantly ignored. And that's where the hacks come in. You can't skip the engagement part. You can't skip the connection part. You can't, I mean, in some ways you can skip the relationship part because the relationship part can come after the sale. So you can make another sale. The first step, occasionally you can skip the relationship part, but every sale afterwards depends on your relationship with them. But there's no hack. There's no substitute for hard work. There's this whole don't work hard, work smart kind of thing. But if you're trying to work so smart that you forget to do the actual work, there's something missing. And that is where I think so many people, they mislead themselves. There are no shortcuts to this. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make, particularly with all of the software and all of the discussions around inbound marketing and building a brand and an awareness, and people will beat a pathway to your door. Look, there's so many people trying to sell to 1,000 people at a time who couldn't sell to a person sitting right in front of them. That kind of incompetence doesn't scale well.
So you've been known to say that most hacks and tools are a waste of time. Is that what you're talking about right now?
It is. It is. I think if you don't have the fundamentals down, if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, then trying to scale that is not going to help you. But most people are, like you mentioned, the hypothetical 22-year-old hotshot, right? They're gonna sell them all.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how are you going to sell them all if you can't sell one?
Right.
I'm not saying you can't sell them all, but let's take a step first. And I talk about process a lot. I say, look, no step is too small if it's headed in the right direction, but we can't skip steps, and we got to make sure they're all going the same way.
Yeah.
And we will get there when we need to get there. If you need to get there faster, let's take more steps, but let's make sure we're always taking steps. We can take bigger steps. Sometimes we get a little more confident. Right. But, and I work with clients on this all the time. I relate to people who are new to selling because I was once new to selling and reluctant to begin with. And so people think there's a certain way you have to do it. And they see their peers who've been doing it for 15 or 20 years, and they want to do what they're doing, forgetting that there's 15 to 20 years worth of mistakes and perspective and experience that goes into that ability to take, maybe one of their steps is worth 3 of your steps as a beginner. That's fine. But I mean, it's like, your toddler can't run a 4-minute mile, and they know enough not to even try.
Yeah. So we're listening to Jeff Bajorek. Great stuff. Just incredible content that you have out there. I think it's really good to re-listen to this podcast, take some good notes. I think what I've heard today is, the process is important, consistency is important, patience is important. Just kind of know the process. I'm looking forward to getting your don't have a closing problem and get more in tune and acclimated to that project that you're working on. Really good stuff. Now, Jeff, what I like to do when we close out this show every week, podcasts, I'm a guest on a lot of podcasts, and sometimes they drive you crazy as a guest because, you kind of have to stay stuck in the questions that you get asked, and sometimes you might want to share something else. So every show I basically give you the floor to close the show. It's like now's your time. This is your platform. It's your thing. No more questions. It's all you. Tell our listeners what they need to hear as we close out this show. Give us that great advice.
Use your brain every day. Don't be afraid to think about something. Don't be afraid to think through a process or something that you would have otherwise assumed that you need to be doing. I think everything deserves to stand up. It deserves an opportunity to stand up to scrutiny. And if you're doing something just because that's the way you were told to do it and you don't understand why you do it that way, then think about why. There are a lot of experts out there. There are a lot of people who pay attention to the things that other people say. And I'm one of those people sometimes where people pay attention to something that I say, and then they just go and do it. And I try very, very hard to encourage people to think through the things that I say. I post things on LinkedIn on a regular basis, and I say, listen, tell me where I'm wrong. No, please tell me where I'm wrong, because blanket statements can be dangerous. But if they hold up to scrutiny, then you can feel confident about taking that advice and going forward. And if it doesn't hold up to your scrutiny, then reply to my post, send me an email, do something that engage with me in some intelligent discourse, so you can understand where I was coming from through the statement that I made and how it applies or doesn't apply to you. You get better because you have different perspective. I get better because I have better perspective and I know how to communicate my thoughts to an audience. And I just think that the thought process is something that is missing a lot, because everybody wants to do everything as fast as they can.
True.
And it's speed at the expense of effectiveness. And I just don't think, look, I think your effectiveness can scale, but you got to be effective before you scale it.
That's
So
right.
think, use your brain every day and you'll be better off.
I love that. Use your brain every day. You know, one of the things we talk a lot about is the importance of, and again, maybe I'm old school. I don't know. I actually love to read.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a lot of reading. I read books, and it gets my mind thinking, you know, and it gets me using my brain every day. A lot of people are auditory, so they like to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I'll listen to books every while, but my preference is to read. So whatever your choice is, you know, do it, but make sure that you're nourishing yourself with positive content every day. Become a master at your craft, and be exposed to the book or the audio or whatever. Let that be the initiator to get your mind going. And like you said, Jeff, use your brain. Just use your brain, man. Just use it. Use it every day. So that's really good stuff. Well, listen, we sure appreciate you being on the show. I want to make sure that everybody understands that you can get to Jeff's. Where do they find the 5 Forgotten Fundamentals of Prospecting?
It's on my website. So you can go to jeffbajorek.com. And there's a tab in the menu that, you know, a little drop down menu there where you can download a copy of the book for free. You can buy it on Amazon. If you're one of those people who likes to read something in your hand versus on a screen, then that's there too. But it's kind of funny. I didn't realize how many people actually want a paper copy. Right? I mean,
That's me. That's me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's one on the way. I'll send you one.
Good. Looking forward to it. So, and then your podcast, the Why and the Buy podcast. Make sure you jump on there and check out Jeff on the podcast. And he's featured on many other podcast shows all the time. Hey, listen, man, keep doing what you're doing, brother. Appreciate you. You're elevating the whole profession of sales and marketing. Appreciate all that you do, and look forward to working with you in the future.
I really appreciate you saying that, Cody. This is a great program, and you've built a business because of how important relationships are to everybody. Listen, life's a team sport. I mean, business is a team sport for sure, but I mean, life is a team sport. And without the relationships that you're encouraging people to cultivate in their business lives as well as in their personal lives, we as a human race wouldn't be as well off as we are. So thanks for doing the work you do.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Very well said. So just a quick reminder, everybody, we got the Relationship Marketing Grand Summit coming up in Salt Lake City on August 8th and 9th. You can go to rmgs.com, www.rmgs.com. Get that information. Make sure we're going to have some incredible speakers there. I'll try to get you on our next year's show, Jeff. Would love to have you with us. But the first ever specific relationship marketing Grand Summit taking place in Salt Lake City. Make sure you get there. It's going to be a great event. All of our listeners, get on out to Salt Lake. We'd love to see you. And we'll see you on another episode. Take care, everybody.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Relationship Marketing Podcast with Cody B, be sure to subscribe to the show and leave a review so that together we can get this message, The Power of Human Connection, out to the world. You can find Cody's new book, The Power of Human Connection, on Amazon or the Send Out Cards gift store.